Hey everyone, it's Nicole again. For those of you who don't know who I am a 23-year-old college student with a condition called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. With that comes a few other issues, specifically GI issues for me. So I have an ileostomy due to recurrent rectal prolapse and colon dysmotility. So my whole colon was removed about a year ago, a little over a year ago. And I also had surgery for GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease. I've had that for probably at least 10 years now. So in the summer, I had surgery in my esophagus it was called a Nissen fundoplication, and I'll post videos, the links for the videos down below. Those are on my channel as well. But the goal of that surgery was to stop the reflux from happening, which it did, but then it caused an esophageal stricture basically. So there was a tightening of my esophagus. So food was not allowed to pass through without me throwing it up or it getting stuck and being super painful. That's a little bit of the background information. I got a feeding tube after that. I am in nursing school. So now I have a feeding tube. I've had a few different kinds of feeding tubes. I'm just going to go over a few commonly asked questions and then show you how to take care of it, just basic care. And then later on, I'll make a video on how I use the pump. I use an infinity pump as well. So let's get going. Okay, so first I just want to start off by showing you what it looks like. So then it makes a little bit more sense when I'm explaining it later on. So let me show you. My pants are pulled up pretty high. So this is the Mikki Button. I put gauze around it and tape just because it gets a little mucus and discharge, so it kind of collects that and doesn't get on my clothes that way. It's a small tube. You can open it, and there's an anti-reflux valve in it, so nothing comes out. So it comes in a box like this, and then inside of the box there are like little instruction manuals and this thing. Some of the stuff was already taken out when I had mine put in, so it doesn't have everything. But I had my first one switched out because it was too tight at the time. Now I think it would fit okay, but I don't think we're ever going to use this one again. But this is what it looks like. The balloon down here is what is filled up and sits in your stomach. This is what it looks like. And then you uncap this part. Sorry if it's blurry. And this little hole is what you plug extension tubing into. This balloon you don't really touch, at least I don't touch it ever. Some people are told to inflate it and deflate it to just make sure the water's flowing and doesn't leak out or anything, and there's enough water in there. Okay, so other pieces of the set include one of these, which is an extension tubing. Actually, that's the wrong one. I wanted to show you this one. This is the part that goes into the feeding tube. This is a medication port. This is the feeding port. And then there's just a clamp. This is a very important thing to make sure you close before you take it off. It also comes with this. This is supposed to be the continuous feeding extension set. This is supposed to be bolus feeding extension. So I used this once, and it was really just to vent my stomach, because when you have a feeding tube, and I had a Nissen fundoplication, I wasn't able to throw up, and I was super nauseous. So if I ever do become super nauseous and it just sits in my stomach, I could attach this and I would just put this in like a bottle, a water bottle, the sink, toilet, whatever, and let it just seep out. So it's kind of like I'm vomiting, but it doesn't take any effort. It just comes straight out of my stomach. But this one is super firm. Like, I guess it's bendable, but it's firm, and it doesn't have a 90-degree angle like this one does. It's just straight. So when you put it on, you have to like twist it and lock it, and then it just is uncomfortable for me. I feel like it pulls too much on the tube. So this is how it would go in. Put it in like that. Yeah, that way. And then it's locked. So here's this one. And the other one goes in a similar way. It's just a lot easier to use, in my opinion. And then another option they came up with recently actually is called an ENFIT, ENFIT connector system. And this involves more of a luer lock ending. So it's different. Like this outside is like the soft type of material the rest of the tube is. But then the inside, there's a hard plastic. I wish this camo was better, but I'll show you pictures. It's a hard plastic tube. And to use it, you have to use one of these syringes instead. They're purple. And it has like the luer lock little spinny stuff at the end. They're much better, in my opinion, because look at how awesome that is. It doesn't come off. Whereas a regular syringe like this, which is what I started off using with one of these, you could pop it right off. You just push it on and pop it off. And that's how the feeding pump works too. But they did come out with an option. So you could take off the Christmas tree ending of the feeding pump, I'll show in another video, and connect the ENFIT part. So you just screw it in and it's super secure and you don't have to worry about it. If anything, you worry more about it pulling on the tube in your body than you do about the tube coming out and causing a mess or anything. So that's nice in my opinion. Back to the questions. So one question I get asked all the time is why do I have a feeding tube? And I kind of went over this already in the beginning, but I have a feeding tube because I had surgery for GERD. I was up for GI surgery. They made my esophagus too tight and I wasn't able to swallow very much at all. It was just like a liquid diet. So I was losing weight pretty quickly and was in nursing school. So an alternative for me to get through the semester instead of going straight into surgery once again was to get a G tube, PEG tube, percutaneous endoscopic gastrostomy is what it stands for, or G tube is what most people call it. And that would get me through the semester. So that's why I have it. Since I've had the feeding tube, maybe even a little bit before that, I'm not exactly sure, I've had stomach emptying issues. So I don't tolerate normal portions of food like most people do. And that's why I stopped doing the bolus feedings with the syringe and went to the pump feedings instead. Another question I get asked, and this is mostly by like my nursing friends, is what made you switch to continuous feedings and stop the bolus feedings? And I just explained that too. But I wasn't able to tolerate the bolus feedings. It was just going in too fast. Even if I did it by gravity, it was too much at once for my stomach to handle, which is crazy to even think about because I know your stomach can hold more than that, but it was too much for my body. So that's why I switched to the continuous instead. I didn't wear a backpack with the feedings during clinical. I just wore it during nursing school and when I was at home and out and about. It would have been probably too much of an issue to do it in clinical. And I was only there for like 5 hours, so it's not that big of a deal. Okay, so another question I get asked all the time is how was it put in? The feeding tube, was it put in surgery? Was it an endoscopic procedure, interventional radiology, or bedside? So there's many different answers to this because I've had a few different feeding tubes. The first one was placed under endoscopy in the GI lab. I had that one. It was a PEG tube, so it wasn't this easy detachable Mikki Button. I had that for 4 weeks, and then I switched it to the button. And that was switched out in the GI lab as well, just because my connective tissue disorder made me more susceptible to tissue tearing and issues like that. And my first PEG tube did not have a balloon that held it in place. It was a bolster, like maybe rubber or something. I'm not even really sure, but it was a bolster that was not very flexible. So in order to remove it, it could be done bedside for most people, and there's some kind of tool to thin it out a little bit, but it could have caused a lot of trauma, unnecessary trauma for me. So my doctor decided to do it in the GI lab. The G tubes are able to be switched out without interventional radiology or a GI lab. Mine is just a G tube. It's not a GJ. So more likely with the J tubes, those are needed to be placed in IR because it goes further into your small intestine. But since mine is just in my stomach, it could be done in the office. And I did have it changed probably twice now in the office. Just I had an issue with the first one, and then the second one was after surgery. So it's not painful. It shouldn't be painful at all. It just feels super weird because when they take out the tube, there's negative pressure in your stomach. So it kind of sucks in all the air from the outside. So you hear this like loud noise and then it feels crazy weird. Doesn't hurt though. But then my doctor just stuck his finger and like plugged the hole until they got the new tube and put some lube on it, and then moved his finger, stuck the tube in, and that was that. So you fill up the balloon and it stays in place. It was pretty simple, only took a few minutes, and it's not a big deal at all. Okay, so another question I get asked all the time is, does it hurt? It doesn't hurt really at all. In the beginning, there was definitely pain. There was definitely discomfort. I actually stayed in the hospital overnight and was on Dilaudid when I first got it because it was super painful. I think there was an infection from the very beginning there, and I had a lot of swelling, and there were a lot of different factors affecting it. But still, I had a lot of pain in the beginning. So I wouldn't say it's too unusual to have those issues from the get-go. For like the first 2 months, it took me to get used to it. But after that, it gets super easy. The stoma site is what they call it, the little tunnel into your stomach from your skin. That forms after a few weeks, and that's why they don't let you switch out the tube usually for 4 weeks. So after that's already formed, it's not that big of a deal. But no, now it doesn't hurt. The only time I get pain in that area is, one, if it's infected, which it has been infected like twice, or two, if there is too much food in my stomach and it's not the tube causing it, it's just like delayed stomach emptying, gastroparesis issue that's causing my stomach to like become paralyzed and not pass the food through, not the feeding tube, but like through to my intestines. So that's the only reason I would really get pain from it. Okay, another question is, what do I do about medications? And right now it's a little different than it was before because I could swallow a little bit better now. But before, what I would do is use mostly liquid form. So this is Zofran in liquid form. I would pour this in like a little paper cup. And this one, I don't really need to mix with too much water. I just put a little bit of water in it, like swirl it around a little bit, suck it up with the syringe, and then I already have this attached and put it through here. Afterwards, it's important to flush it with at least 30 mLs of water, just to make sure the medication gets all the way through the tube and into your stomach. You can also choose to crush pills and dissolve them in water. And I have a pill crusher, not with me right now, it's in the other room. But I didn't really like using the pill crusher if I can avoid it. I would rather use the liquid form because crushing pills, you have to use a warm water in order to get some of them to dissolve really well. And even then, it doesn't dissolve all the way. And I didn't want to use water that was too hot and burn my stomach, and I just wasn't a huge fan of it. So I did it when I had to do it, but I would prefer this. And I got like Tylenol 3 in this form. I got Tylenol and ibuprofen in liquid form just in case. So yeah, that helped. Okay, so another question I get is, why use gauze underneath the G-tube? And like I showed you before, I use gauze underneath it because I get like mucus, some kind of like discharge. Sometimes it'll bleed, not commonly though. Most of the time it looks like boogers sort of that come out of the stoma site, and it can irritate my skin. If the skin gets too wet, it can cause skin breakdown, which it has before, and that's when it gets painful for anything to touch it. So I typically just put on, they're called IV drain sponges that I get. I order them from Edge Park, where I get the rest of my ostomy supplies. And it comes in a pack of 2. I use one of them and then the micropore paper tape because I have sensitive skin. Just tape above and below it, and I'll leave that on for most of the day unless it gets pretty saturated, which it really doesn't tend to do. I also have little G-tube pads that I'll put underneath it. The first G-tube I had was too tight and I couldn't fit one of the pads underneath it. It would have just pulled it up into my stomach like abdominal wall, and that would have been dangerous. So I do use it now sometimes, but you know, it just depends on my mood and if I have them clean or not, because they could be washed. Okay, so those are the only questions I plan to answer right now, but if you guys have any more questions, feel free to email me, Facebook message me, or comment below with questions or video requests, and I would be happy to answer those for you. I will provide all the links down below. Okay, so I plan to make more videos on how I use the feeding tube and connect it to the feeding pump, the infinity pump as well. So if you're interested in that, just look down below or on this video or on my channel, and hopefully I'll have that posted pretty soon. All right. Hope everyone's happy and healthy. I'll see you later. Bye.